Hey guys, welcome back to Telltale. I'm Emily.
I'm Greg.
And today we are going to be talking about the controversy in the Hugo Awards. If you guys have
Mm-hmm.
been paying attention, Hugo Awards were held in China most recently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's caused quite a stir with some of the things that have come about from what happened there. Go
Mm-hmm.
ahead and delve into it a little bit, Greg. You know it better than I do.
Okay. Well, it's something that a lot of people probably saw this coming, and were
Mm-hmm.
it was like watching a train wreck, and
Yeah.
they knew it was going to happen, and
Yes.
let's just stand on the side and watch it occur. Because a lot of people did, when China was chosen, a lot of people did raise the issue: do we really want to have it in a country that has a lot of human rights issues? And
And censorship
well, it
issues.
went ahead and was held in China, and first of all, there were a lot of discrepancies that were noticed because after the Hugo Award voting, they're supposed to report
Mm-hmm.
how the voting went.
Yeah.
And it's usually done, most years that information is made available to the public within 48 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But they are given like 3 months.
Yeah.
They just never have taken that long until this last time. It was a 3 month deadline and still no reports.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the day after the deadline, it was finally put out, and people looked at it and they started seeing, wait a minute, there were all these people that were getting a lot of nominations that were removed from
Yeah.
consideration in the
Mm-hmm.
first round of trying to determine the Hugo Award finalists,
Yeah.
and there were no reasons being given for why these people were removed. Probably the most famous one was R.F. Kuang, being her book Babel was removed from consideration for
Mm-hmm.
as a finalist. And I mean, that's a book that I haven't read it, don't really know anything about it, but a lot of people really loved it, and a lot of people thought that was going to be the winner this year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just removed from all consideration, so it could not
Yeah.
even be a
Couldn't
finalist.
even be voted on at that point.
And there were a lot of and there was an incredible lack being held in China. Usually when the World Science Fiction Convention is held in another country, you see a lot of that nation's writers being at
Mm-hmm.
least getting into the finalist ballot.
Yeah.
Because the people that are, it used to be you didn't have online votes. You had to attend the convention to
Yeah.
vote on these things. And since everybody, since a large part of the people attending from the
We're
convention
from
would have
that
been
country.
local, they were
Mm-hmm.
nominating the people that they were most familiar with. So
Mm-hmm.
that's typically what would happen. But there was a suspicious lack of Chinese
Mm-hmm.
authors being considered.
Yeah.
And so people started asking questions: is there some kind of censorship going on here?
Yeah. Are we experiencing the Chinese government interfering with these awards?
And it took a lot to get through things and find out more of what was going on, and it resulted in a lot of people leaving the Hugo
Mm-hmm.
Awards committees because they were being questioned
Mm-hmm.
and criticized for their role in this, because the Hugo committee is not, they are not Chinese citizens. They do
Mm-hmm.
not have to listen to the Chinese government.
Yeah.
And yet they still did and went
Mm-hmm.
ahead with what turns out to be the Chinese government pushing. It raises a couple of questions. I mean,
Yes.
number one, does a government have the right to enforce its laws on something like the World Science Fiction Convention and the Hugo Awards?
Yeah,
It's
because it
being
is
held in their country.
international. Yeah.
Yeah, it's from outside of their country, but it's being held in their country.
Mm-hmm.
So realistically, shouldn't it adhere to their laws and
Mm-hmm.
beliefs?
Mm.
So
What a
shouldn't
controversy.
shouldn't China be allowed to say these authors don't, these authors are um,
Ones we wanna.
not ones that we want
Mm-hmm.
our citizens to be reading their books
Mm-hmm.
because their ideas are subversive to our government.
Yes. And as an American too, my automatic reaction is like, ew, censorship,
Yeah.
yucky, ick,
But
freedom of
communist
speech.
totalitarian country, what do you expect?
Yeah, honestly,
their laws are not going to be our
People can get
laws.
killed over this.
Yeah.
That's like a legitimate issue.
Well,
Like,
they really did kill people over this in the late 60s. They had this short period where they allowed people the freedom to create the artwork and say what they want. And then when they knew who they all were, they went and rounded them up and threw them all in
work camps
prison
and
camps,
prisons. Yeah.
and they died.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
this is the government that we're putting the World Science Fiction Convention into and abiding by their laws.
Mm-hmm.
But it is their country, it is their laws.
Yes.
We're guests,
And the greater, yeah,
kind of
in
have
the
to.
greater picture of things, it is almost safer to abide by the restrictions than it is to, like, if you went to North Korea, would, would
Yeah.
you go spouting American propaganda
No, you'd
and
never
risk
get
your
out.
life over it? Yeah, it's not worth it.
No.
You will die. They will kill you, and they are
So
very adamant about it.
the Hugo Award committees should have either made the decision that they do not want to put themselves in that situation and
Mm-hmm.
denied the request for the World Science Fiction Convention to be held in China,
Mm-hmm.
or they need to set up a system whereby the Hugo Awards are not handled within the country. And so the award is truly international, which with the internet we have the ability to do. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
tradition for the Hugo Awards, you had to be attending the convention.
Yeah.
Now you can pay a little money and you can stay home and vote.
Yeah.
And we could make the whole thing that way and make it truly international.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, we could make it kind of outside and above all the different
Yeah.
laws as far as consideration.
Yeah. It brings up a lot to consider about intercultural communications and worldview framework.
Hmm.
Like, again, me, an American who's a white female. Ew, censorship is icky. We should be allowed to say, and especially as a queer identifying female, we should be allowed to have representation and say what we want and do those things. There are other countries where that is a very high risk thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
It's still not legal to have full freedom of speech like in America. So we do have to, when dealing with intercultural communications, there are some concessions that need to be made for the safety of others.
Right.
And as long as it's in goodwill, I'm not against it.
Hmm.
But it's also possible to give two reports, the actual report of what was caused, and then if you just came out and told the truth and said this was eliminated for the protection of the people of China. I understand people are very racist right now. China is under a lot of suspicion from American culture and Western culture, especially. But at the end of the day, as much transparency as these international organizations can give us is going to be a lot. You're gonna have people talking no matter what. I would rather have the honesty than have it be all weird and sneaky,
Hmm.
because it was a delicate situation.
Yeah.
But they are allowed as an international thing. And and it's politics behind closed doors. I don't know
Hmm.
if there were threats. I don't know
No.
if there was bribery. I don't know what kind of circumstances, if they were just trying to put forth goodwill and let China be involved because it is legitimate and they are going under a lot of scrutiny right now. There's a lot of factors that we just don't know that
Yeah.
could have been involved in this. But
Yeah.
it does also bring into question how legitimate can international awards be if this is a continued issue?
And how can you be inclusive of other
Yeah.
cultures when those other cultures are going to act in this manner
Yep.
and censor what
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to promote?
Yeah.
You know, then
Exactly.
you can't be inclusive of everybody around the world. And so then you can't truly be a world science fiction convention when you got some countries that won't allow you to vote for your favorite science fiction story because of
Mm-hmm.
their politics.
Yep.
So that and that has always been that's been one of the big controversies with the Hugo Awards
Mm-hmm.
since its inception, is that it really is an American award.
It is.
There have been times when it's been in other countries. I think the next one is in Scotland. There
Mm-hmm.
have been other world science fiction conventions in England and other countries, but the vast majority of them have been in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so the vast majority of stories that have won Hugo Awards have been published in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is not a world science fiction convention. It's really not a world award. It is a US award.
Mm-hmm.
Whether anybody really wants it to be that way or not, that's how it has played
Yeah.
out.
The branding has changed
Yeah, and it's been
considerably.
called the World Science Fiction Convention from the beginning, but the first one was just a bunch of guys in Philadelphia.
Yep.
There
Yep.
was no world about it.
Yeah. Just a bunch of guys in Philly.
Yeah, so it's that's one controversy. The second controversy is that the Hugo Awards were named for Hugo Gernsback, who founded the first science fiction pulp magazine, Amazing Stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a science fiction award.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1960s, you suddenly had these stories that read more like fantasy stories getting Hugo Awards.
Yeah.
If it's going to be a science fiction award, why are you allowing fantasy to be winning the awards?
Mm-hmm.
It's not science fiction. And so that raised a huge controversy over what's the difference.
Yeah.
How if you have something like Anne McCaffrey's
Pew
Dragon
pew versus
Riders.
clank clank.
Yeah. If you have something like Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of
Mm-hmm.
Pern, it's set on an alien world, but it's dragons.
Yeah.
It's a fantasy story
Yeah.
with science fiction trappings,
Mm-hmm.
but it was allowed and it was
Yeah.
voted on, and do you really should that really be allowed? And I think that was the first really big thing with the Hugo Awards, is
Mm-hmm.
that it was a science fiction award, but all of a sudden a lot of fantasy was getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
And should that
Yeah.
just
Does it
be ignored?
constitute? Mm-hmm.
And over the years since then, pretty much the decision is, yeah, just let it ride.
Mm-hmm. Keep them
There's been
both.
fantasy, there's been horror.
Oh,
It's not really a science fiction award
it's
anymore.
literature.
Well,
Creepy.
not just any literature, because somebody writing something like Little Women is not going to win a Hugo Award.
Maybe. Not in this day and age.
No,
Maybe though. Yeah.
but it did call up a huge issue of just how do you define science fiction? And
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of arrived at my definition that I've been using for our stuff as something where you have some kind of scientific or technological situation that is affecting the lives of beings, whether they be human beings or aliens on another planet.
Mm-hmm.
But there has to
So
be,
Sean Carter of Mars just kind of slipped in there a little bit with the Mars and the stuff, but
yeah,
it was mostly fantasy.
it's
Yeah,
it's a fantasy story that happens to take
to
place
be on
on
Mars.
Mars, and they
And an
have some.
atmospheric situation happens at one point, so.
Yeah, and they have some technologies that are not on Earth. But
Mm-hmm.
if you remove those things and set it in the Old West with six shooters and horses, the story doesn't change
Yeah,
really.
yeah. It's still an adventure.
Um, so I don't really define that as science fiction. Um, but by the same token, my definition includes the Grapes of Wrath,
Oh.
because the Grapes of Wrath is about a situation that really did happen, but it happened because of the science of agriculture of the day not being sophisticated enough to understand that they need to
It's
rotate crops.
green punk.
And so you had the Dust Bowl.
It's a green punk dystopia. I love it.
Exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
and people's lives were affected. They had to flee to California
Mm-hmm.
because of something that
Scientifically, that was
occurred
happening.
due to the technology or lack of
It was
sophisticated technology of the day.
science.
So
Correct.
even though it's historical, it qualifies as science fiction.
Ooh, I have a book called Out of the Dust that I really enjoyed as a child. It's a diary about a girl surviving the Dust Bowl
Mm,
with her family.
mhm.
Interesting.
And of course, Star Wars becomes science fiction too, instead of science fantasy, because it's about the Death Star, a technological innovation,
Mm-hmm.
and how it affected the lives of the people trying to rebel against the
Blew up
Empire.
planets. And if you
So
get
it's
into
no
the
longer
most
science
mystery,
fantasy.
we could talk about the Sun Crushers. we could talk. Sorry.
No, it's
Yeah.
so my definition is very inclusive of a lot of stuff that you wouldn't think to normally
Mm-hmm.
think of as science fiction, but it
You
does
could make the argument. I kind of love that.
it does kind of kick out things like John Carter of Mars,
Mm-hmm.
and of course all the fantasy. Earthsea gets kicked out. I mean,
Oh well. But
I
yeah,
don't think anybody would
Hugo
call.
Awards then has the kind of has a right to make up their own definition and bring things in then.
Yeah.
So, but
So that
also,
was that
hmm
controversy. And then of course came the politics,
yes,
where
always
there was a group of
politics.
people, the Hugo Awards in the earlier days,
Mm-hmm.
science fiction in general was more what we would call conservative today.
Mm-hmm.
That shifted by the 1970s. It started to become a lot more liberal themed.
Mm-hmm.
And by the 2010s, you had, flat out a lot of extremely liberal stuff being getting all the nominations. And there were a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people that had a more conservative political leaning that their stuff wasn't getting nominated
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't liberal, they
Mm-hmm.
felt.
Yeah.
And so they tried to fight back, but they did so by trying to hijack the Hugo Award
Yes.
ceremony.
Yes.
And that got things pretty much just shut down for the whole year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And everything was just determined invalid because they basically stuffed the ballot box
Yeah. And fucked
in
it up
order to
for
make their
everybody.
point.
Yeah.
So they might have had a valid point that
But
the Hugo Awards need to be more inclusive of a variety of political ideologies,
mhm.
but they tried to make their point in a way that was just totally wrong
Yeah.
and just made them look evil.
Yes. They went about it in a very bad way.
Yeah. So, I don't know what to do about that one. The all the awards, if you look at them, they're extremely liberal minded
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in the Hugos, the Nebulas,
Mm-hmm.
all of them.
And that's
Is that a good or
just
bad thing?
the pendulum swing,
Hmm.
honestly, of our politics right now. We are dealing with
Yeah.
a lot of conservatism in politics, and my husband and I even talk about this quite frequently, that some of the best horror movies come out during conservative legislation
Hmm.
in the United States.
Hmm.
Um, and then when it swings the other way, you have the, maybe not the opposite, but you just don't see as much of really good horror coming out.
Hmm.
So I think it is just the ebb and flow of politics and what people are or aren't into, or the voices that want to be louder, or the voices that want to be heard more frequently. Yeah, I think that's
But
just the ebb and flow of politics in
when you
general
just have an
and public
award
opinion.
trying to determine what is the best science fiction written in the past year,
Hmm.
you got to be, you need to be inclusive. You can't say
Yeah.
only the best liberal science fiction that came out in the
Hmm.
past year,
Well,
or
but it is,
only the best queer
it's,
science fiction that came out in the past. I mean,
yeah,
you could do your own award that is specifically that, but with the
yeah.
Hugo Awards, I think you need to include everybody.
Excuse
You
me.
need to include the conservatives. If they can write a damn good book, then why shouldn't it win the best novel?
But that ends up being an issue of public opinion. Because if it is a public opinion based bolt it a public opinion based vote, then it is the public who is actually choosing these more liberal books. So
Yeah.
you are going to run into the
Well,
biases of the voices that
to
are
a point, with
loudest.
the Hugo Awards, it is the fans that nominate and choose and vote on on who wins, but it's only a section of the fans who register for the World Science Fiction Convention. And
Mm,
now you can have a non-attending registration and vote on the Hugos, but still, it isn't all the fans. It is just the people who choose to register for the World
got it.
Science Fiction Convention,
Got it.
which should be a good cross section, but that's what a lot of people have been asking. Is it? It
Hmm.
seems to have a bias,
Yeah.
but it has had a bias through its entire history.
Yes.
In the 50s and 60s, the bias was just the other way.
Yeah. And the ebb and flow of, again,
But
politics
but there again,
and
Robert
public opinion.
Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress won Best Novel. I think deservedly so. It is a spectacular novel, but it is a libertarian novel.
Hmm.
And so it's not today's politics.
Yeah.
But it was okay in the 1960s.
Hmm.
And a lot of science fiction fans agreed with Heinlein's politics in the mid 1960s, early 1960s, whenever that was. Um, so that novel was able to win. It would never win today because
Hmm.
it's too right wing.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
But that doesn't change the fact that it's a damn good novel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of damn good things that I've read that are in
Hmm.
complete opposition to what I believe.
Yeah.
But damn, that was well written and well presented. And
Hmm.
it was thought provoking, and maybe I still hold to my own values, but it gave me an interesting perspective from the opposing view.
Yeah.
So I think those works are still important.
Yeah. Just because we disagree with something doesn't mean it's not really well done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And doesn't mean it's not something that is engaging and makes you think.
Yeah. For sure.
And those should have a shot at winning best novel too.
Yep.
Um, and that, and it brings up an issue. If you look back at the early days of the Hugos, in particular, there's one book called They'd Rather Be Right
Mm-hmm.
that people have tried to read today, and they say this thing is just unreadable. It's so
Mm-hmm.
bad.
Yeah.
But it won the Hugo Award, I think, in 1956.
Ooh, we should add it to our
For,
list.
yes, it won the Hugo Award in the mid 50s for best novel. And people today
They're
that
like,
try
ew.
reading it are like,
Mm-hmm.
why? Were they
Yeah.
all on drugs or something?
Yeah. And I think what's interesting too is even when we talk about these things, I have a lot of empathy for both sides because I was raised in a very conservative home, or
Mhm.
fairly conservative home. And my thoughts now are very different from the way I was raised, but I have a lot of empathy for both sides because I can understand where the other side is coming from because I lived it for a good
Right.
long time. And there is this concept of fear. Fear is probably the biggest driving force behind a lot of what we deem hard to reconcile
Hmm.
with, is because people are acting on fear. Like the Chinese government is acting on the fear that their people are going to be corrupted by whatever they're reading, by
Hmm.
whatever standard their government has chosen is corruption.
Which we do in this country.
And we do it too. Yeah, we do it
That's why
too.
we pull books from
That's why
libraries.
book burnings happen. That's
Mhm.
why censorship happens. That's why people like Burroughs had to fight for so long to get his literature actually out there in the world because there was censorship.
Yeah.
Um so it's not like we're any worse or better. But at the end of the day what it does come down to in my opinion is fear.
Hmm.
And that fear causes ignorance.
Hmm.
And that ignorance either is intended or not.
Hmm.
It's not about what the intent was, it's about how the message is conveyed to everyone else. And so we
Hmm.
see it as ew, icky, evil government being censored and blah 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 and fascism and dictatorship and communism, and we put up all these red flags, but we do the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
We have legislation all over the place now about censoring libraries and what people can and can't pull happening
If
everywhere.
you think you are right, and if you think everybody should go down the right road, you can't allow people to be thinking other things.
Yeah.
You have to squash
Yes.
any opposing thoughts
Mm-hmm.
because it's wrong.
Yep. And that is exactly why. Hot take! Everybody judge me softly. I don't believe in cancel culture.
No.
Because I feel that one, cancel culture does not leave room for authentic change. It forces a change
Hmm.
without giving good representation to whether that person
It
actually.
makes the assumption that one political viewpoint is absolutely right and
Yes.
everybody else is
It's not even a
absolutely wrong.
political, it's not even a political anymore. It's everything,
Hmm.
every opinion.
Hmm.
And I fully believe that just because you have an opinion doesn't make it relevant to the situation.
Yeah.
Everybody's a little bit wrong, everybody's a little bit right. Everybody's just trying to make it on this. And there's a lot more gray area than people want to say. People want to hardline black and white things. I get that. I'm neurodivergent too. I would love the world to be black and white. It is not. There is a lot of gray area. And in a capitalist construct, it is very difficult to have ethics because everything is monetary.
Hmm.
It really does come down to it. So that's why, to me, cancel culture doesn't work because the authentic change is not able to be proven.
Hmm.
Is it just for capitalism that this
Hmm.
person is coming out and saying they're sorry? Is it just for, you know, getting their viewers back on YouTube because of that? I don't believe that cancel culture can actually be effective. And anything that is systematically put into place has to be systematically dismembered.
Yeah.
That takes time. Cancel culture does not take the time, energy, and effort to actually deal with the root causes of issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't come to the plate understanding that humans are messy and change is hard.
Mm-hmm.
So, I hot take,
Yeah,
please don't
I got
cancel
in
us.
trouble on the internet not too long ago by referring to it as the political flavor of the week.
Yeah.
Um, People don't understand that 2 years from now, all your liberal politics might be outlawed.
Yeah, it might be different. And the election's coming up. Things are going to change,
Mm-hmm.
whether we like it or not. And humans do change, but it's not a fast change.
Mm-hmm.
Ever.
Mm-hmm.
Things just don't swing the other way immediately.
No,
We're
yeah,
going to have
wouldn't be.
conflict. There's
It's
going to
only
be,
2 years, but
yeah,
you know, it things could develop towards being more conservative
yeah,
again in this
we don't
country, and
know.
all the liberal ideologies could
Yes.
become endangered and
Yeah.
even outlawed.
Yeah. And so we do have to sit down and consider these things when we're talking about issues like the Hugo Awards.
Hmm.
This is stuff. Dealing with people and humans in general is going to be messy.
Hmm.
It is always going to be messy. I want change in the world. I want to see things improve. I do not believe it's going to be instantaneous and in a self gratification culture. Cancel culture is the closest thing to instant gratification.
Hmm.
And that's what people want. And that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
It's not realistic.
yeah, and it has no place in the Hugo Awards because the Hugo Awards is still supposed to be a science fiction award, and in science fiction, you're trying to look at the big picture,
Mm-hmm.
not the immediate politics, but the 1,000-year plan,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and where we may end up 1,000 years from now, how things could change if this happens.
Yeah.
And that needs to be, um, well, it can't be totally independent from political viewpoints. It's going to be colored by the author's political
Yeah.
viewpoint, but
But that's the
it
intention
still
of the
needs to
author.
be like an experiment where you set things in motion and you think about how this is going to affect that and that's going to affect this and how things are going
Mm-hmm.
to play out, even if what you foresee from that within your story doesn't really agree with your politics or your neighbor's politics.
Yep.
It needs to be free of that to be a laboratory to think about social
Yeah.
experiments.
What if? I mean, Man in the High Castle is a great example of a book that explores what if,
Yeah.
because what if Hitler won?
Hmm.
And I think we need to look at the world through those lenses too, even if we're scared of it. And
Yeah.
even if we are ignorant of it, I
Hmm.
think it's important to hear those words and understand them because we don't learn with what we agree with.
Hmm.
We learn from what we don't. Of course, I hate that it devolves into hatred because when people are scared, it's much easier to be angry than it is to be scared. So they try to switch it into hatred and feel like they're. That I think is absolutely
Well,
wrong. It needs to
when
be,
things are falling apart, somebody always feels like they need to take control.
yeah.
And that's when
Or
you
they need
have a
to blame
dictator.
someone.
Yeah.
And who's
And that's
easier
when
to
you have a
blame?
dictator taking charge of things
Mm-hmm.
because somebody needs to get things back together. And
Yep.
the only way to do it is to force it.
Yep. Again, instant
Unfortunately.
gratification, a byproduct of instant gratification
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
So we're just dealing with a lot. But yeah, in the Hugo Awards, I see it being a very difficult decision to make, but I think honestly, from my perspective, they did the best they could with what they had.
I think so.
It seems.
Hmm.
Because I mean, that can't be an easy situation to be put into. And there's probably a lot of conversations behind closed doors and a lot of lost in
Yeah, and
translation.
it is now getting people examining the bylaws and trying to come up with something better,
Yeah.
which is a good thing.
Yeah. And that's why we need to have some of these struggles to happen.
But there's still one thing that has never really been a controversy, but that an issue that I want to raise,
Go ahead.
and that is kind of related to that they'd rather be right getting best novel for, I believe it was 56.
Mm-hmm.
In any one year, you don't have any guarantee that somebody's going to sit down at a typewriter and write a great novel.
Yeah.
It could all be crap,
Yeah.
but you still have this award ceremony where you have to nominate something and call it the best novel of the year,
Yeah.
even if it's the one of the worst novels that has ever been written by the genre.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are other years like I think 1953, there weren't any Hugo Awards, but if you look at what was published in that year, Childhood's End, Martian Chronicles,
Mm-hmm.
the Demolished Man was after that, but Lord of the Rings, I think, was published. How do you decide?
I know. I
You got so
know.
many just brilliant
Yes.
stuff that was published that year that how do you call one of those better than the rest?
Yes.
And that's the dilemma of an annual awards program where you
Mm-hmm.
have to say, this is the best over all the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Is that is you aren't it isn't necessarily a great work,
Yeah.
and you may be pushing aside and also how do you know what stories are going to be everybody's favorite 50 years from now?
Yeah. And also, now, what stories were predominantly written by you
Well,
don't
yeah,
get to know that anymore. It's frustrating, but we have all these interesting controversies that could come about.
yeah.
So it is. I am definitely a person who believes in beginning with the end in mind. And as these new technologies and as these new issues come up, they do need to be examined and they do need to be. But most places, like, I mean, Hugo Awards are dealing with that now, looking at the bylaws and trying to make them better. But sometimes you
Hmm.
don't know there until you go there. You
Hmm.
have to cross that bridge. And then you have to figure out if you're burning it or you're going to build a better bridge.
But there is kind of a better way, and that's the way we're doing it with our top tales.
Yeah.
We consider each work individually on its own merits.
Yep.
We do not compare it to other. I mean, we
We
may talk
do.
about
Yeah.
it's similar to this, but in determining whether or not something should get a top tail, we don't look at what else was published
Mm-hmm.
and say whether or not it's better than those.
Yeah.
We just look at
The
our
work on its
reaction
own.
to that particular work and whether or not it does it for us and makes it the top tail. And if something like that were applied at the level of the Hugos,
Mm-hmm.
to have instead of an annual best, but more like a Hall of Fame,
Mm-hmm. We would get a lot of
first
really
of
great
all,
literature.
you could bring stuff into that Hall of Fame as it's been around a while and gets discovered and
Mm-hmm.
more people find it and go, hey, wait a minute, this has been around for 30 years and it's awesome. And
Mm-hmm.
nobody paid attention to it,
Mm-hmm.
and now put it in that, give it a Hugo Award as a
Yeah.
Hall of Fame
Yeah.
story, which is, it's basically what we're doing with our top tales.
Mm-hmm. But it would be which with a much larger sample size at
Yeah,
least
with
than just the
more
two
than
of us.
just the two of us, or in a lot of
Because we
cases,
know
just
we
me.
don't have it all together. We have our own
Hey,
biases and
speak for
privilege.
yourself.
I've seen you. We've known each other how long now, Greg? Come on.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
But yeah, it is yes, with a larger sample size and taking it to the extent of internationally, even
Hmm.
truly internationally, would
Yeah,
give us a
that's
lot of
that's the
really
other thing.
great literature.
It's really hard because like you and me, we don't speak other languages. How are we supposed to read something from Zimbabwe
Mhm.
unless
Wait
somebody
for the
translates it?
translation to come out.
But that's why so much of that stuff, even French science fiction, there's tons of it that's never been translated.
Mhm.
So none of us in the English speaking world know anything about it.
Yeah, and a
And
lot of
we
the stuff
can't
that
judge.
has been translated mostly because I'm on Libro because we support a local bookshop here in town through Libro. At least I do, and I went on there looking for a lot of Virginia Woolf stuff to see if I maybe when I'm crafting I can at least get an audiobook slipped in and kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. Lots of translations in audiobook of classic
Mhm.
work.
Mhm.
But then you start looking at the contemporary stuff,
Yeah.
like nothing.
And when you
Unless
get
it's
into
by a
some of the,
bilingual author.
yeah.
Like I'm finding like Mexican Gothic and stuff, you're finding those it translated already.
Hmm.
But if it's not and the author has not been like really invested in making sure it's accessible to all languages, you got nothing. You're stuck with what you're stuck with.
Yeah. And well, Brian Stableford, who just recently passed away, he translated a lot of French horror and fantasy and science fiction
Mm-hmm.
and got it into publication in English. So the French was pretty much taken care of by that one person.
Mm-hmm.
There are some other people that are continuing the work, but then you have like German,
Yeah.
tons of German science fiction, the whole Perry Rodan series, which in Germany is up to like 4,000 something
Mm-hmm.
um, installments. The first 135 were published here in the United States, translated.
Yeah.
The rest of it, you have to know German.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, this whole big, and it's a huge phenomenon in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
This is like Star Wars in Germany,
Excuse
and
me.
it's been going on since 1960.
I'm burping a lot, sorry.
Okay.
It happens. Diet Coke. Anyway. Yeah, and they kind of have, well, now we're seeing it. The Witcher is a really great example too of a
Yeah.
fantasy series now because of the video games. It's more popular
Well, what
internationally.
else was published in Poland besides that and
Oh,
Stanislaw Lem?
I know.
I don't know. I
We
never heard
don't
of it.
know.
It's
Exactly.
not translated. Nobody talks
Exactly.
about it. It's never nominated for Hugos, and there might be some really awesome stuff that we just don't know anything about.
Yep.
And so there needs to be more people who are capable of digging into that, translating it, bringing it to all of us, bringing it to the attention of the awards committees, and getting that stuff better known.
And then we have to get rid of the sorry. I'm gonna say something controversial again, as I do. Then we gotta get rid of those English speaking Americans who are like, learn our language. They should start learning the other languages so that we can get better literature internationally. No, sorry.
That would be nice, but there are people like me that just don't have the
That's true.
ability.
I
I've
don't either.
tried.
My brother learned pretty good conversational Russian from playing video games with guys over in Russia for a good long while and China. He was really good at it. He could just pick up languages. It's insane to me.
I
Me, I hardly know
yeah.
Spanish.
I took German in high school, failed. I tried again in college, didn't fail, but I got a D. I just
Decent.
don't have the
Yeah, I don't
aptitude.
either. But I think there are those minds who get crushed a lot
Mhm.
by that that perspective of just stay in your lane. Just
Yeah.
stay patriotic, stay this way. And I'm like,
And it's so hard when for so long the United States has dominated media.
yes, we have dominated media.
Publishers and movie
The
makers, they
international
were all here.
business language is us and Mandarin.
Mhm.
That's it. So it is what it is.
So authors in other countries just have not had the opportunity. But that's where people in this country need to, who are capable of understanding those other languages, need to step up and translate their
Hmm.
works and bring them to us
Yeah, which is
and
also
bring
why I
them to our attention.
appreciate the Hugo Awards trying to go to other countries too.
Yeah,
I think
it's
that's
just
important.
they need to think it through next time and
Hmm.
try to come up with
Figure
a
out a
better
better
way.
process and get a better pool of information and
Mhm.
get. I think Hugo Awards, wouldn't it be awesome if anything that was nominated, the Hugo Awards were responsible for getting translated and published in the
That would be
US?
so cool.
That would
An
be the
annual,
coolest thing you could do, Hugo Awards. You are welcome to that
be a
idea.
pretty big book, but you could do it online,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. I mean, there's
put it as a subscription thing online. You subscribe to it, you get access to all these
that would
Hugo
be a
nominated
really
works every
cool,
year. And
yes, even and having it available in audiobook or other things too. If
mhm.
I think that would be a really cool way to go to make sure that
And
international,
maybe the Hugo and Nebula committees could put together a subcommittee that would have the goal
yeah.
of translating all this stuff and
Hmm.
then put it out there for people to donate money to support the effort
Yeah.
and have a group of people that are capable of doing that and
Hmm.
making it more available to everybody in not just translating other stuff into English, but translating English stuff into
As
other
many
languages.
other languages as we possibly can. And that is the beauty of the internet. You can do it remotely. You can get a pool of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who would be able to get on this project
Mm-hmm.
and be able to be paid for their work. It would improve the economy. It would improve literature as a
Mm-hmm.
whole. It would improve human empathy because we'll have a better understanding of how these different cultures work based off of how their works are, especially if there's nonfiction to be involved in it too. It would be so interesting
Mm-hmm.
to see them do that. So,
And if they did that, then we truly could continue to call it the World Science Fiction Convention.
yes. Until
instead of
then,
instead of being hypocrites and calling the U.S. Science Fiction Convention the World Science Fiction Convention.
yes. And then politics and everything would be a little more settled, I
Mhm.
think, because everybody's voices would be
Yeah,
heard.
just name some Scottish authors. Bram Stoker was Irish, right?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm
And I
terrible.
know James Joyce was
I don't know a lot about the authors. I'm one of those
exactly.
people who don't, well, and I don't pursue it though either.
Hmm.
Like I just really enjoy literature for literature. I don't get wrapped up in the controversy surrounding authors. I just appreciate the work and move on to my like to the next thing to appreciate. I don't
But
feel like I have to know everything
the
about the
World
author.
Science Fiction Convention that in 2024 is being held in Edinburgh,
I
Scotland,
know. And
and
like,
they write in English
do they
or
have
a
good
version of
romance
English.
novels? I
I
only
don't
hear
know.
about Scottish romance novels.
Oh, okay.
Men in kilts and leather jackets. I don't know. I've never even
But
read them. I hear
I
about them
mean,
though.
there's
They're
not
out
even a
there.
translation problem there. But why don't we hear about Scottish science fiction authors?
Mm-hmm.
They got to be out there.
They
Why are they
exist.
not? Why are we not
Maybe
hearing
they're just
about them?
hiding the fact that they're Scottish because they don't want any prejudices against them. Because there is a lot of prejudice and unfortunately, because art is
Mm,
subjective.
I
So
don't see why, but
it's because art is subjective.
yeah.
People want to find something that they can relate to, and if they feel like they can't relate to a Scottish person or any other nationality for that matter,
Yeah,
they'll
but
just be like,
Scottish is part of the United Kingdom. They're basically our same culture.
I
A little bit
yes and
different,
no.
but not a lot.
Yeah,
They have bagpipes and kilts,
yeah,
you know?
and really cool accents,
Yeah,
and they eat haggis, which is pretty good.
I've never had it.
I don't know that you'd like it, but it's not bad. I liked it,
But yeah,
but yeah, it is.
awards committees step up and start educating us about Scottish
Yes,
science fiction authors so that we can make better choices for the World Con being held in Edinburgh, Scotland this year.
and anyone who wants to is willing. You can steal the idea that we have presented here. Make your own awards and truly be international. If we need to just start fresh, go for it.
Hmm.
But there's definitely a lot to be said about how these awards are being done and the prejudices and
Yeah.
all the crazy stuff that has to be involved. Like, it can't be easy,
Hmm.
but anything worth having is never easy anyway.
Yeah.
So I
Or
don't think
just, like the Wisconsin Science Fiction Convention, just be honest about it and say, you know,
just Wisconsinites.
they're just feminist science fiction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh well.
Um,
Good for them.
that's
They're
all they
honest.
do.
Yeah. They're honest.
They're
They tell
honest
you.
about it. If you want to be racist science fiction, be honest about it and give
Yeah.
awards for the most racist science fiction.
Yeah.
You know, but be honest and
That would,
true to what you're doing.
and that would be kind of interesting to see the racist one because it's like, is it an irony? Or are they really white supremacists? Which side is actually starting this? Sorry. There's a lot I could play with that one.
Yeah,
Well, we'll write a book about it someday.
I think
Anyway,
we just did. This is
this
probably
whole
the
thing is basically a book about.
longest video we've
Yeah,
done.
this whole video is basically a book about that. So, yeah. So, thanks, guys, for joining us for this. Do you have more that you want to kind of say?
No, we've
Yeah, we've beaten
beaten
the
the
dead
horse.
horse. And we do ask that you do judge us softly because this is all stuff that needs to be discussed. It's important to bring it up. We understand that we are just two white folks making sense of our world. We understand that you are too. So please comment and let us know what you think, but also judge us softly because there's a lot of nuances to these topics and issues. So give us grace and we'll give you ours.
Hmm.
Don't be a dick. Unless
Unless you're
it's Phil.
Philip K.
Unless you're Philip K. Dick, you can be a dick then. But anyway, so thank you so much for joining us, guys. Like, subscribe, comment, let us know what you think. Let us know if you know information that we didn't touch on about these Hugo Awards, and any of the controversies that they were dealing with. We've got a lot that we've covered, so feel free to just interact with us and, be respectful and kind to one another as best you can in the comment section. So, thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye!